Welcome back, everybody, to the newest episode of the Big Hair Big Licks podcast. I am so excited for today's guest, especially because he's one of my favorite guitar players in the city. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Dale, I hope I'm saying your name right, Dale McIntyre.
You got it right.
Perfect. Awesome. Great to see you, Dale. How have you been?
You too. Yeah, I've been good. Things are, completely different than I think anybody thought music would look like in 2020. But yeah, I think just like everybody else, just trying to evolve and make things work in the new landscape.
I love that very much. Yeah, it's just kind of a lot of taking every day as it comes. And first question I'll ask you is, how have you and your band been through this pandemic? Like, how have you been dealing with it? Are you guys still writing, getting together stuff? Like, I guess we can't get together now, but
yeah, not now. We've been writing a lot. We have a ton of new material and a cool idea for where our sound is evolving for the next chapter of Ex Omerta. And of course, now that's just all being done remotely, basically. I'm talking to you on a computer that I just picked up today so that I could set up my own home studio and be able to record remotely with Scott and Spencer. So that's our plan from here on out, is just keep trucking and keep making it work, and hopefully be able to start another release cycle in the new year.
No, that's awesome. What kind of software are you using for recording?
We're using Ableton, and I people tell me that that's like weird.
No, I was actually thinking about getting Ableton, so that's but I guess a lot of people use like Pro Tools. That's like the
yeah. I have a few friends using Reaper and different things like that, and Ableton's just, I think Scott and I went in on like a cheap interface a couple of years ago, and Ableton was like the license that came with it, so I think we just stuck with it because of that. But it works.
No, that's awesome. So I guess like when you guys are writing like remotely, like, is it sending different parts to each other, or is it like you guys like a situation like here where you're both on webcam kind of trading off ideas? Or
a little bit of both. Usually it's one person sort of thinks that they've written an entire song and sends it to the other really excited, and there's usually a good DNA to an idea within it, but it always gets torn down, rewritten. But like it's the ideas that have that really strong DNA of a song already there that tend to keep it the most true. We have one new song, one of my favorite new ones. It's called "Fuck Off," and
that's awesome.
Oh, can I swear on here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. But that was one that Scott wrote, and almost that entire song, all we did was he wrote it on the piano, and it's now played on a 7-string. So that's awesome. That's the only real change. Yeah.
No, that's wicked. Actually, that's funny you mentioned a 7-string, because that was one of my questions later on in the interview. We'll get to that later, but
cool.
No, that's wicked. It's so great to talk to another guitar player. My past two guests have been vocalists, and being a vocalist for my own band, it's cool to talk to them. But like, of course, talking about guitar is going to be a real treat, especially since
no, like, and I was really stoked when you asked, because you're I mean, legitimately, this isn't trying to kiss ass, like, you're one of my favorite guitar players, period. So I was like, I want to nerd out with Ronnie.
I really appreciate that. Likewise, like every man, I can't even begin to say how much I love your playing and your writing, and you know that we cover one of your guys' songs a lot when we play out. Let's talk a little bit about that. Sink In.
Yeah.
That is probably, and I'm not saying this because you're the guest today, that is one of the most vicious riffs I have ever heard in rock and roll. So, like, from the beginning of rock and roll to now, like, how did you come up with that?
That was that was Spencer's riff. He's the bass player in Ex Omerta, and it was kind of there's kind of two halves to that riff, right? Like it's and the tail end changes. So he had the first part, and he had, I think, 5 different tail ends to that riff. And I remember writing the song, and it was Scott keeping a click, and then Spencer playing the riff, and we had these 5 parts of the riff laid out, and we'd be like, okay, like play part 1, and then like on beat 4, it's like now play part 3, and then go back to part 1, and through doing that for about an hour or so, we ended up with the chorus of the song. And then I think we just all 3 of us just wrote around that. Basically, Scott came over to my place a few nights, and we ended up working the verses out. And he already had a chorus for the vocals, and we loved his vocal take for that chorus, of course. But yeah, it was just sort of pieced together through a lot of different ideas that were all mostly Spencer's riffs, basically.
That's wicked. So like when you guys go into, so Spencer wrote those riffs there, and then how do you guys kind of transpose, like how do you add your touch to it? Because man, one thing I want to get into later is tones, because you've got an unbelievable guitar tone, and I've asked you about it before, but like who, let's start off with this question. Who would you say are some of your influences with guitar and playing guitar?
Yeah, I always get really attracted to like a sound more than anything else, I think. And for me, I remember being just really gripped by like Tony Iommi's sound, and he had this weird like dryness to his tone, but it was also just so much heavier and more gain than anything else at that time. Obviously before my time, but and then I'd say like Jack White and Josh Homme, and those would be the 3 people who've had that impact on me, where I would hope when I do what I do that people can kind of hear the DNA of that in what I'm trying to do. When we recorded our first album, actually, the sound that I had in my head for most of the guitar work was actually really inspired by Priestess's first album. So, and in a weird way, I didn't know it at the time, but it turned out that our producer used to live with Priestess.
No way.
Which is just like a weird thing, and they're still friends. But yeah, there's this weird metallic quality to that record, and I mean, like the song "Lay Down," like there's the little guitar break, da, 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 da. And every time I would hear that, I'm like, that's what I want my guitar to sound like. So I ended up finding this weird overdrive pedal that got close enough while also kind of bringing a new quality to it, and that was sort of the basis of the sound that we got on that album and for our live show.
No, that's wicked. I hear all of those influences in your playing, but the thing that really stands out to me about you when you play is you can hear those influences, but you've got your own sound, and nobody sounds like you. And I think that's a really, yeah, no problem. That's a really, especially nowadays, that's a really hard thing to do, I feel like. And I feel like maybe I'm kind of looping all guitar players in a box with this, but I feel like every guitar player is trying to do that, like find their own sound and make themselves. But it just comes naturally for you. Like from what I hear and what I see, I'm just like, I could close my eyes and know that it's you playing. And
that's the highest compliment I could hope for, because that's everything that I like in a guitar player, is just that quality. And I think, I mean, I know I'm not the most technically proficient player, but I think that kind of accepting that and just trying to put the song first is just like, that's, if I could diagnose myself as having any kind of sound, I hope it's through that lens.
Yeah, no, 100%. And like no, dude, I think you're a ripping guitar player. The technical stuff doesn't, like, as I've gotten older, I've learned that stuff is really cool, but definitely serving the song is more important. And
Yeah.
and people will not notice it, but it'll have more of an effect on people if you serve the song,
Right.
and you absolutely do that 100%. So
Thanks. And likewise, I mean, I remember when you guys played at the Park Theater and we were covering each other's bands
yeah, yeah,
and we learned a couple of your songs, and I think it was Dragonfly that we were like, this is like a ripping song. And then watching you guys play, and just from the first note, it's like you were playing our songs, but it was just so like, that's Ronnie playing our song. Like, that's not any other guitar player trying to cover what we're doing. It's like, that's Ronnie right there. And being able to just do that so confidently is something I really admire about your playing too. It's just from the first note, it was like, oh yeah, like he's not just trying to play what I play. He's like, he's doing his thing.
well, I appreciate that very much, and that comes from a place. To be completely honest, when we were doing that thing, I was super intimidated because like I was listening to the songs and I'm like, oh my god, his tone is so like just unreal, and his riffs, and I'm just like, I wanna do my best to pay respect to everything you were doing. And then I realized eventually that like I just have to do it my own way. And
Yeah.
it's funny we're talking about this because I was just watching a thing before we were doing our interview. Tommy Emmanuel and Joe Bonamassa were talking, and they said that exact same thing. Like Tommy was like, you just gotta be yourself. And how
Yeah.
that kind of segues into my next question. How has that kind of led you through your journey? Like, where did you start playing guitar, and how did you kind of develop your style through the years?
I remember when I think I was in the third grade or the fourth grade, and I really wanted to learn the guitar. I really wanted to learn the guitar, but I really wanted to be a bass player for some reason at that time. And then I met a friend who was like an amazing guitar player. He was a couple of years older, and that just changed it all for me. But I remember back then, before I ever knew how to play it, like I remember like muting strings on it and trying to play these like rhythmic patterns where for in my like 10-year-old brain I thought that I was like writing songs. And so as far back as I can remember, it was always for that reason that I wanted to play the guitar. It was to write songs. But no matter how how much I try to be removed from the guitar sometimes in order to write, it always comes back to that. But as far as sort of figuring out what kind of guitarist I am, I think that that's just still really an ongoing process. When Scott and I started playing together, like we were in like the 8th grade, and from that point until I'd say 2017, like we called ourselves a funk band, and we played like Red Hot Chili Peppers, like, but way worse, like white boy funk in the worst way possible.
Oh, that's awesome though.
Yeah, and then I think that again, just it's always so related to songwriting, but it was we wrote Sink In. Spencer had that riff, and we always said that we wanted to sound heavier when he joined the band, and he wrote that riff. And for some reason, it was just one of those lightning in a bottle kind of songs where over the course of 1 or 2 rehearsals, like we wrote the whole thing really quick. And I think a lot of it was because like we all wanted to sound like that, but we thought that we had to keep trying to do what we used to do. And so from that point on, like my own personal playing changed a lot just from that genesis. And I ended up, just getting a lot more into a lot of noise rock and a lot of more industrial kind of sounds. And Scott introduced me to Queens of the Stone Age about 6 years ago or so. And listening to Like Clockwork was just one of those moments where I just felt like, oh my God, I never knew that there was music that sounds like this out there. And it just sort of showed me that there's a place, there's a niche there. Like there's a sound to be had by doing things heavy, but not necessarily always having to be distorted screaming or even really distorted guitars. There's a way to down tune and keep heaviness without being too abrasive, I guess. And so that's what we try to do. We try to make music that's kind of, it's heavy and it's loud, because that's what we always want to do. We're all very ADHD people, and we just want to scream and play hard, but we want to write songs, and we want to have an eclectic emotional palette to what we do. So again, and I think that's something that we're doing a better job of on the next batch of songs for sure. But that was kind of meandering, but yeah, my playing always tends to follow what we're writing, essentially. And so on the new stuff, I've gotten a lot more into some more modern sounds. I really like Bring Me the Horizon just dropped a new record last week.
So good, yeah.
I'm obsessed with it, and I'm like, it's like the new clockwork to me. Like, I'm like, oh, now this is how I want to play. But there's been some really interesting songs to come out of that, because whereas I might want to play songs that sound like that, it's being played over songs Scott's writing that are the types of songs he wants to write. And it all still fits together in a really cool way, I think.
No, that's wicked. With the new stuff, so I want to talk about the first album there. You know, let's kind of go back to the history of the band, because you had said you guys were playing up until 2017, doing kind of like you labeled it as a funk, and then you guys formed Ex Omerta in January 2017, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Spencer joined the band, I think, in 2016 or maybe even 2015, and we were still playing older songs. We didn't really know what we were doing in terms of trying to like be a band and have our own audience and things like that. And so we were kind of playing these like funk songs that were weird, but then, you know, rehearsal would end and we'd start having drinks and listening to like older Muse records. A lot of Mets, I remember, was a band that all of us were really into. Same with like Death from Above, 1979. And that was right around the time that Royal Blood debuted as well. And so just, yeah, we had, Spencer ended up writing that riff, and it was just like we all stopped looking backwards and started looking forwards. And it was like, this is the music we all talk about liking, like, let's make it.
No, that's awesome. And then what was the process from the formation of the band to the first record? Because you guys released the first record 2 years later, July 2019. What was the kind of the process like? Did you guys do, like you had mentioned, working with the producer there? Talk a little bit about that process, and then how it's led from the first album to working on this second album.
Yeah, so we met Mike Nash, who produced our first record. We met him around the time that we decided to make a new band. Like, we decided to call ourselves Ex Omerta, and we had this new sound with this song sink in our pocket. And Nash lives in Montreal. He was coming to Winnipeg to come work with Bright Righteous, Scott's old band. And the timelines just worked out the right way, where we had, I think it was like a week in like February 2017 to work with him. So we took all of our gear out to Spencer's cabin out in Sandy Hook. And I mean, like, that was our first time meeting Nash, was going to a cabin and staying with him there for a week. So we ended up like, we went over Sink In. We made that song better. We wrote, I think, I want to say 7 or 8 songs while we were there with him for that week, that at the time we were really, really stoked on. And we ended up recording some pretty half-assed demos of them. And we played all of those songs for a really long time. but we never felt all that confident in, I think, just the overall sound of those songs. There's a couple of them that I still like, and I'm trying to even work on to this day, because there's some good choruses or like a good, instrumental bridge, but the songs just didn't have much of an identity to them, I guess. And we always try to hold ourselves to a higher standard and set the bar higher and higher every time we do something. So that was an instance of that happening. And it was all thanks to Nash, I think, because he's always able to push us a lot. And so the ultimate sort of genesis of that was in 2018, we got to work with him again because he was coming back in town. And this time we wanted to make an album. So what ended up happening was we didn't know we wanted to make an album. We thought we wanted to record, I think it was 3 demos with him. And we went back out to Sandy Hook to a cabin to record again. And we worked on the 3 songs for about an hour. And then we were done. And we had 2 more days or whatever booked with him out there. So we just started writing, and in those 2 or 3 days, we ended up with 12 new songs. They didn't all have all the lyrics or anything, but it was all of the songs on the first album plus a couple that didn't quite make it. And it was Nash just pushing us that made that happen. We have one song called "Are You Ready for What's Coming?" I think it's RYFWC on the album is the way it's written, but that was written at 4 a.m. or something. And he was just pushing us to keep playing, and we were also partying a lot that night, but that ended up being the song that wrote itself at 4 a.m. And it was from, again, Mike Nash just being able to push us and knowing he does a really good job of knowing how to play to certain people at any given time. So if I'm looking kind of dejected from the process and I'm in the corner on my phone while everyone else is doing something, he'll put on a Death from Above record, and he knows that I'm gonna pick up my guitar because I'm super stoked on it. But that was mostly how that album ended up being written, was 2 or 3 days of him pushing us to write songs. We had a 2-week break where we all wrote a ton of lyrics for all the songs, and we met back up for another week at the cabin to lay down all our instruments and lay down the vocals. And it took, about a week of recording to make it all happen. But his DNA is all over it. I mean, even the guitar tones that you do hear on it, the first note of that album that you hear is an acoustic guitar. And I don't think anybody really realizes that when they hear it, but we had this broken little condenser mic and overdrove it until it was pretty much blowing up and playing an acoustic guitar into it.
That's awesome.
And and we did these little, I'd call them underdubs of the whole album like that, because he just wanted to dirty things up. And so all the songs actually have this insane overdriven acoustic guitar giving the sound its character, and a few other really weird little tricks like that with vocals and things where we couldn't have done it without Nash, essentially.
That's wicked. Yeah, that I feel like that experience and kind of that outlook from outside the band in is invaluable. It's there's no I don't think that experience the word I'm trying to say is it's priceless. It's
hard to be objective about anything that you make, right? I'm sure you've had it all the time where there's certain songs that you would write where you're like, I just wrote that, whoa. And it's that's one of those little out of body moments you get where you're your own audience and you're hearing this thing and you're like, I just know that this is cool.
Yeah.
Whether people think it's good or bad, like I think it's cool. And you didn't have to mine for it in any way. It just kind of happens. And that's what I think a really good producer can bring to the table, is they can make that happen as many times as they need to make it happen.
Exactly. And like those little tricks, like the acoustic being overdriven there, like stuff like that is stuff like most people would never normally pick up, but it just adds such a spice to the
Yeah.
album. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
So going forward, you guys do your first album. Now, what was the process up until this pandemic like? I know you guys had hit the road. You played some shows with One Bad Son, the Lazies, the Wild. Did you guys have plans to tour, like while all of this was going on, like before the pandemic hit, or?
Yeah. So in January of this year, we did a tour out west. So we played Edmonton and Calgary on one weekend, and then we played Regina, and then we played Saskatoon a couple weeks later. And had a blast playing out that way, because up until that point we've only went east. And Toronto is really cool, but it can just be really, I find it can be really grating going out there a lot. So we'd spent a lot of time in Toronto up until that point, but going out west, we got to sort of feel like maybe we got to do what we wanted a little bit more, and we weren't so restricted by, you know, like a 30-hour drive or having to fly with our gear, so we'd have to leave a guitar behind or something. So we were having a blast doing the Western circuit, and recently had started working with our friend Jody on booking some shows, and he managed to get us some really cool opportunities. So the day that this whole COVID thing sort of happened, I think it was like the 11th or the 12th of March or something, we were finally able to confirm a tour that we've been working on for a while and announce it that day, where we were going to be just doing a lot more media appearance than we've usually done, and some other cool doors like that were opening up for us on this one, including you know, just some better performance fees and things like that. And it was gonna hopefully be a more regular thing that we could build up. And it was, anyways, it was the day of the announcement that Live Nation had to tell everyone that they axed all of their tours. Probably wouldn't happen for the year. So it was initially it was a huge kick in the ass for us, where we felt like the whole way that we'd built up our year had kind of been put and turned on its head. But again, I mean, it only took a few weeks to sort of adapt to things and flip how we were working. And for us, we're just operating on the assumption that live music might not be a thing for a little while. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're going to actually end up doing is a lot of live streaming, sort of, you know, co-writing with some other musician friends, and just jamming with people, getting to talk to people like this that we don't normally get to, even if we were on the road. So it's closed some doors, the pandemic, but it's also opened up a few really cool ones for us.
No, that's wicked. I think that ability to kind of adapt, especially during this time, especially in writing, like how you guys are writing now and stuff, I think that's really important. And I think that shows that that even if this lasts for a long time, you guys are still going to put out some amazing stuff. And I can't wait for the second record.
Right on. Yeah, that's our hope, is that pretty soon we can start putting some of this stuff out, because I think some of it's really cool and a lot of it is really different, but in a really cool way, instead of just being, you know, it's not going to be like the slow second album or anything like that people would anticipate from a rock band.
No, that's awesome. Let's talk about some guitar nerd stuff now.
Yeah.
What kind of amps do you use?
So the only amp that I've ever really used up until this point is a Fender DeVille. It's the Hot Rod 212.
Nice.
I really like the 212 because you can just crank the thing and it just screams, and it's a weird sounding amp. I think it's got this really a lot of presence. Like no matter what you do, there's always this high end thing to it. But it's just become part of the sound so much that I don't think that anything else would do it as far as playing songs from the first album. But for all the new stuff, though, we've got there's a lot of orange on the new songs, and Mesa's. A triple rectifier has made it onto pretty much every song we've written at this point. And so I'm dreading the fact that I might have to buy a triple rectifier.
No, that's wicked though. Like, do you find like I find like a Fender takes pedals different than like an Orange or a Mesa? Like how has that not affected your sound, but kind of like had you kind of redo things in terms of routing your pedal board and stuff?
I think it's you're right. It's actually been pretty huge. 'Cause I find that when I use my Fender, I sort of know what to do with the pedal board situation, kind of to get any sound I want at any given time. Whereas the tracks that we've done that have the Mesa on them, it's just kind of, oh, like we need the Mesa sound, and it's like crunch channel, like same settings, go. And there might be some, like a whammy in front of it or something like that. But as far as actually affecting the sound, I find that the newer amps that we've never really used before until now, it's just usually the sound of the amp, and that's it.
That's wicked. So with guitars, I know you use I always forget how to say the brand name, Hagstrom.
Hagstrom.
Yeah, that's got such a killer sound. It's like a really like thick, but
Yeah.
it cuts through. Is that like your main guitar? I've seen you use a Les Paul as well.
Yeah, the Hagstrom's always been my main guitar. It's like the pickups are like all mid-range or something, and it's all mid-range from the guitar, and then the amp, I always have the mids at 12 on the Fender, and the pedal that gives the overdrive for all the songs in our first album also has a mid control that just stays cranked. It's like they all just hype each other up or something. The Les Paul I've used quite a bit too, like all the songs on that first album that are in standard tuning are played on the Les Paul, I believe. And another Les Paul was the Drop C guitar, but I replaced that with a Warlock last year.
Nice.
And honestly, because I thought it would just be hilarious. and then I ordered it, and I got it sent to my house, and I opened it up, and it actually looks really cool because I'll grab this for a second. Like, this is the Hagstrom.
Yeah.
But the Warlock that I got has the same binding as the Hagstrom, and the headstock is actually really similar because it's like a Gibson headstock on the Warlock, which I didn't even realize when I had ordered it. I just thought it was going to come with like the pointy Kerry King headstock, and I just thought that it would make people mad, and I would like that.
No, that's wicked. What do you find the differences between the Hagstrom and like the BC Rich and like the Les Paul? Like, I know you said the Hagstrom's more of like a mid style guitar, but like how do you choose what you're going to use on each song? Is it just kind of like a feel thing, or?
That's mostly what it is, I think. It also, like, it sounds really shallow, but I think that like a guitar has to look the part. And I mean, there's been times where doing music videos or something, it's like I might use a different guitar than what was recorded just because I feel like it doesn't look right. But as far as figuring out what guitar to use, I think I have a really vanilla taste in what I go for in a guitar these days. It's, you know, PAF humbuckers, a tone and a volume for each pickup, and a three-way switch. And like that's the case in the Hagstrom and the BC Rich, and they have the same PAFs now in both of those guitars that I've put in them. So they don't sound all that different necessarily, except for maybe the scale length affecting it a lot. But yeah, mostly it's just like I chose the Warlock because it's like, oh well, this is the drop C guitar. Like, let's use that 80s guitar that Anthrax used to play. Like, you know. But yeah, that's pretty much that. The Les Paul that I still do have, I just find like always sounds like a classic rock guitar, and so anything that sounds that way usually gets delegated to that guitar because it's the most outside sounding one since it has P90s, and they're just uncontrollable P90s. So
I love those P90s. It's like you can just get sounds from hell through them no matter what.
It's so unexpected. I always thought when I was younger and I didn't know about guitars, I'd look at a P90s guitar and I'd be like, oh, that's like the clean jazzy guitar or something. And then I got this Gibson in a trade one day and I was like, it just won't stop screaming at me.
No, that's awesome. Would you ever like you guys are getting bigger and like with radio play, touring, stuff like that, you definitely I think companies would definitely benefit from endorsing you. Would you ever seek out like a guitar endorsement or?
I don't know. I don't know if I would seek one out necessarily unless I could think of like a really good reason, of course. But like I've had a couple of companies approach me about that, and it just never seems to be something worthwhile with the way that a lot of their contracts work these days. And yeah, I mean, there was one company last year that just kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, and I see that there is a guy in a really good band, and I really love this guy in town who's endorsed by them now. I hope that they're treating him really well, but that interaction left a really bad taste in my mouth, the way that they tried to approach it. And it kind of put me off of thinking about endorsements for a little while, I think. But I would love to have like a string endorsement, like, because those things I need to replace.
Exactly. What kind of string gauges do you use?
So usually it's like 10 to 52s for standard. Sometimes I'll use 11s for drop D, the drop D guitar, but usually that's also 10 to 52s. And then I like 13s for drop C. Just seems to be the only way to keep it very stable. We've got some stuff on the some new songs where it almost gets a little bit. I don't want to call it gent, but like I feel like I'm just out of touch enough that that's what I'm going to call it. But
hey, I relate to that so much. So.
Right? Like there's just some like behind the nut drop C bending happening on these new songs where I'm like, oh, that's gent. And ever since we started doing that, like I can't use anything lighter than like a 50, I think it might be a 54 or a 56 on the low C. Because anything else, it loses all its tuning really quickly.
Yeah. No, that's wicked. What kind of strings do you use? Like what company?
I've always used DAddario's. I started buying them when I was young, and they always lasted a ridiculously long time. And then they came out with the NYXLs a couple years ago, and I just found that they were even more like they just sound new all the time, and they also last forever. And even for acoustic stuff, they have a nickel bronze series out now. So like a regular bronze acoustic string nickel wound, and it looks like a silver set of like electric guitar strings. I just think it looks cool and it sounds really kind of unique because it has that high mid sound to it, like an electric guitar does. So it's always been the same brand. I just kind of stick with what I know for a lot of what I try to get for a sound out of a guitar, and it's just kind of taking what I know and bending it and breaking it until it sounds cool.
No, that's wicked. I love that so much. So we're gonna kind of shift the interview a little bit, and then we'll come back to guitar. The one thing I always ask all my guests, and I just started up this podcast again, but I really want to press this one question because I feel it's important if there's any younger musicians watching this. It's how do you, so, and I'm not trying to like kiss ass or anything, but you're literally one of the nicest guys I've ever met in music. You're so kind with your words and your time, and you always treat everybody with respect and care. And my question is about the music business, because I find the music business is the opposite of everything of that, and it's cutthroat, and it's so like if you're not ready, it's gonna grab you under. How do you navigate through the music business, being a nice guy, like a really kind guy?
There's a saying, it's like be kind but take no shit or something like that. And as cheesy as that sounds, that's sort of what you have to learn to live with. Because you're just, yeah, you're right. You're gonna get pulled under and you're gonna get utterly trampled on if you can't do that, basically. But I mean, I would say also for younger musicians, find your little team of misfits and try to find the best ones you can, but the ones who also, they know how to make friends, maybe that guy who knows how to make a job for him, you know, the guy who can draw really good, like even though he might not be a band member, there's a thing for him to do there. You know, we need album art all the time, and young bands are going to need album art. They're going to need show posters once this whole COVID thing is finally through. Build up that little team. That family mentality is really important, and you'll end up with some people on your team that really take no shit, and that becomes super valuable. You know, there's there's people to talk to and conversations to be had that I don't do in my band, because there's somebody else who knows how to deal with those things and those people and those situations. But definitely just try to learn what being taken advantage of looks like. It's easy to identify in retrospect, but yeah, it's easier to identify in retrospect. And there's a lot of people. I remember when I first started playing music when I was maybe like 16 or something like that. And even back then I would see the memes about, you know, playing for exposure or whatever. And it always seemed like that was a bad thing, but I used to do it all the time. And I thought there was nothing wrong with it. And then 2 or 3 years later, I realized, like, you know, how much time was wasted doing those free gigs. There are free gigs that are very worthwhile. There's worthwhile causes. But there's also just being the guy who people are always going to know will work for cheap or work for free. And your time's better spent practicing or writing than it is being taken advantage of for a free show.
I love that. That advice right there is absolutely mint, because I feel like I've had my fair share of that being taken advantage of, and it's definitely not a good feeling. So I appreciate the advice to younger musicians who may watch us and now have that knowledge to take forward when they go forward with that.
Yeah. And you know what? The Canadian industry specifically, it's a really hard one because you always have to be working, no matter what it is you're doing. but it's very worthwhile once you can get things into motion the way that you want them to be. So don't let it drag you down too much. Just try to make music for yourself and nothing else is what I would say. If you're doing that, then you're gonna have a great fucking time.
Exactly. No, 100%. And what you mentioned about creating your own team there, that's something that I've really championed because I feel like that is so important is to have your team and your people because I feel like there's a lot of time to be spent trying to join a scene or join a team of people, and then you find out very quickly they're not your people. They don't
Yeah.
care about you or care about, and that's a really tough pill to swallow. So when you create your own team, like that's perfect. And
Yeah.
like I've really loved just from afar, like your and Scott's friendship. Like you can tell when you see you guys play, like when you watch you guys play, there's a chemistry there that's been carried through for such a long time.
Yeah.
How much does it mean to you to play in a band with somebody who's like a great friend?
A lot. I mean, I haven't, started any other bands in the last 3 years or anything like that. And a big reason for that is just it's really fulfilling to do what we do. No matter what we end up, sort of getting out of it. What we get out of it right now is amazing because we get to write music together. We do that for usually several hours a night, and it's a weird thing to write music with another person. I heard a really good metaphor for it a while ago that writing music with somebody is like the two of you walk into a room and just take all your clothes off and just stand there and stare at each other. And that something about that that bareness and that rawness just it rings really true. And once you find somebody who can play off of what you do in complementary ways, and Scott is that person to me, and I hope that I can be that person when he brings ideas to the table. But it's really rare, I think, and it's even harder to get a really raw version of that and be able to just to sit in a room with somebody, and when they sing something with their own voice, which is hard enough to do in front of another person, to be comfortable with that person being like, what the fuck was that? Like, as soon as you find that person that you can do that with, it's hard to let go of it as a musician, I find. And so in that sense, we're always able to push each other, and in the sense of just discovering new sounds and turning each other on to new types of music or types of production, or even stage show stuff, is super valuable again. And that just seems to be something that we've always been able to push each other towards. As much as we do a lot of pushing each other because we're like brothers at this point, it always seems to end up resulting in something that was worth the push.
No, that's wicked. That's awesome. So I guess we'll begin to wrap things up here. Let's talk about some guitar to end it off here. I'm just gonna shoot some questions towards you, and I'll have you answer them.
Yeah.
What is your favorite guitar lick of all time?
Ooh, my favorite guitar lick. There's a Jack White lick, and hold on one second here. I think that it's one of those things where when you hear it, you really don't unhear it, and I think that this kind of sums it up. Is that too loud? Can you hear that?
No, that's you know what? This is freaking awesome. I was hoping you would play some guitar, so this is awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let me just get. There we go. But this. Or this. And it's something that I hear him do it so much, and I can't unhear it now. and he does it in so many songs and in so many different ways. And I just love that continuity of being able to bring that out all the time.
That's wicked. No, that lick is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for playing too. That was freaking awesome.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for letting me.
Yeah, no problem at all. So that's your favorite guitar. Like, what's your favorite guitar riff of all time?
It's a song called "Someone's in the Wolf" by Queens of the Stone Age, and it has this really weird out of tune riff that they play through all the verses in that song. And there's actually two guitars, I think, that play like a semitone apart, and it sounds so disjointed but so sexy and cool, and that's the coolest shit I've ever heard.
I gotta check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah.
If so, I know you were saying that you've never started any other bands, but let's say a big time band needed a guitar player and they called you. What band would you hope that would be?
Oh, there's a ton of them. I would love to play with a band like the Struts.
Oh yeah.
Somebody like that, or obviously I have my dream lists, you know, if Muse ever wanted a backup guitar player, or if Queens of the Stone Age needed a fourth guitar player. But I think that playing with a group like the Struts, where it seems to be all about just having so much fun.
Yeah.
And just being so over the top. And I love that just unrestrained, like, over the topness of it. Or maybe an artist like Grimes or Poppy or somebody like that. I think it would be really cool to get an opportunity. Just that musical eclecticness that they have, and yet they just always have their sound. And it would be really cool to just really watch how that works, I think.
It would be really fun to see you like collaborate with an artist like Poppy or have that collaboration. Like that would be super, super wicked to hear that.
That's one of those things that all of my favorite musical projects have in common. And it doesn't have to be like, you know, famous artists, but it's just, I love the idea of collaboration. Queens of the Stone Age, on their albums, they'll have, you know, Elton John, Trent Reznor, Alex Turner from the Arctic Monkeys, and like one of the guys from the Strokes. And they're all on like every song, but you almost don't notice it. It just becomes a way of helping each other grow as artists. And I love that idea. I would hope that someday we get to do some projects that are really close collaboration once we're allowed to be close again.
No, that would be awesome. I'm trying to think. I just had another one here. Oh yeah. So let's say you could play, and this is kind of a weird one. Let's say you could play guitar for any local band. What band would you play in?
Ooh, local bands. If Dick Lizard returned, I would do it because they were super cool.
Yeah.
There's a ton. I mean, there's so many bands in this city that are just they're so much more proficient than a lot of big name bands out there. I would love to say like Moontan, but at the same time, I'm so limited in physical scope by what I can do that I wouldn't do that to them. You know what I mean?
Oh man, that would be another crazy collaboration though. Like hearing you and Moontan, like those guys collaborate, that'd be awesome.
It'd be cool. Yeah.
Let's say, I'm trying to think. I'm coming up with these off the top of my head here.
That's cool. Yeah. Hey, who would you collab with if a famous artist wanted to? They needed a guitar player. Who would be your dream that you would hope that would be?
I would love to play for Post Malone. That's like my dream gig. That's
nice. That's cool.
That would be
really cool.
Just blending that like the hip hop and like and just all of his songs, you can just hear ripping guitar over like. That
They've all
would
got that downbeat rock. Like you can tell that it comes from there, and it'd be really cool to hear something like that.
Yeah, no, that would be wicked. If you could here's one. If you could collaborate with any artist outside the rock genre, as a band, not just yourself, but as a full band, who would it be?
There's a producer that I think it would be really cool. His name is Eric Valentine, and he's done some predictable stuff as to why I would bring him up, but it's not really the predictable stuff that I bring him up for, because he's done like I think he did some stuff with Third Eye Blind. Who's the band that goes do 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 do?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that them? Is that Third Eye Blind?
That sound yeah, I think it is.
I think so, but he's done like Smash Mouth, Third Eye Blind, but then he also produced like the newest Death from Above record. And I did a deep dive one day just into like 5 or 6 projects that he's done, where I just realized that like there was some bands out there that don't have the most technical guitar players on the planet, but they are guitar sounds that are just stuck in my head. All Star by Smash Mouth. No One Knows by Queens of the Stone Age. All of these songs, and the common thread is him. It's Eric Valentine, and I love the drum sound on the last Death from Above record as well. And to be able to work with anyone who can just be like, this is what each instrument should sound like on this album. Now go write any song you want, and it'll sound like it belongs here because it'll sound like me. Like, I think that's the coolest thing as a producer. And as far as working with somebody outside of the genre of rock, like, it's just anyone who can do that, who can just identify the way things should be.
No, that's awesome. I love that mentality and being so open to that and that versatility. That's wicked.
Yeah, yeah.
There's 2 more things I want to ask you. I just remembered them as we were going through that there. The first one is I saw a comparison and I really loved it because it brings us up. There's a comparison that you guys are kind of like a mix between Royal Blood and Arctic Monkeys. And I totally hear that, but I think it's so awesome that like your sound, you could go tour with Royal Blood, and then you could also go tour with Arctic Monkeys. And in my eyes, it's 2 totally different kind of demographics.
Yeah.
But what does it mean to you to be that versatile, to be able to like your sound really, you could go play with anybody and win fans over? Like
that's definitely, I really appreciate that compliment, because that's kind of the ultimate goal of us as artists, is to be able to make anything and do anything, and yet have people just be able to put it on and be like, oh, it's those guys. That's just one of those things that all my favorite artists have in common. But it's really hard too, because you have to rein things in a lot. And I mean, we've put a lot of orchestras on our new songs and then deleted them. You know what I mean? Like, it's so easy when you have free reign. At some point there, you have to put limits on yourself, and they seem arbitrary sometimes. But in the end, it's those limits that are going to bring you back down to earth in a way. So, I heard Jack White one time say that he made a rule for himself when the White Stripes started, that he would never learn how to play the harmonica. And I love that, because he said that as the guy who writes blues, plays an acoustic guitar a lot, and these beat up slide guitars, everybody expects you to put the fucking harmonica on and go to town. And there's nothing wrong with being that person, but to him, I think that it's like, there's so many of those people. I don't want to join that parade. I want to keep carving my thing out. And so again, it's kind of those invisible rules that I think tend to rein us in best when we start being. It's easy to be like, this sounds really cool, and it's like, it does, but we're never gonna put our name behind this. Like,
yeah. Awesome. And then my last question for you, Dale, and I remember you saying this at the beginning of the interview. You mentioned a 7-string guitar. Is that the BC Rich?
No, I rented it actually, because long story short, Scott wrote a song on the piano, and it was in the key of G. I really liked it, but I didn't like the piano, and I wrote my own kind of little rock version, actually on GarageBand one day. I just down-tuned a guitar that I recorded into my phone, and it ended up just sounding so cool that we had to rent one and record a song in drop G. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it doesn't really sound like a song that's in drop G necessarily. Hopefully when it comes out, that statement makes more sense. But that's kind of what the song's built on. And it ended up, a couple other songs, like I said, just became behind the nut bending, the low 7-string, and some cool things like that.
No, that's awesome. As soon as you said 7-string, I was like, oh, here we go. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. No, awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm just kind of getting going with these podcasts again, so I apologize for the technical issues and if some of the questions were shaky there, but
no, not at all.
It was great to talk to you. Great to see you again. You honestly are one of my favorite guitar players in this scene, and one of my favorite people. I always love seeing you, and I hope you're doing well, and I can't wait for the second record.
Likewise, man. I can't wait to get up on a stage with you again and just hear your amazing fucking guitar scream one more time, because I do miss that. And no, again, you're one of my favorite guitar players, like, no lie. So absolutely keep it up, and I can't wait to be able to rock in person again.
Very soon, hopefully sooner than later.
Yeah.
Right on. All right, you have a wonderful night, okay, Dale?
You too. Thanks so much for having me on.
No problem. Take care.
You too.